All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have agenda adjustments. I don't believe I have any. Do you have any, Meredith? Anybody else have an agenda adjustment? Okay, go ahead and move on. So next up is minutes. So we have a consideration of the minutes for March 23rd. I would make a motion to adopt the minutes for March 23rd as presented. Is there a second? Thank you. Any discussion or corrections? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have the warrants. So I would make a motion to approve payroll warrant 20, purse for March warrant, regular warrant 20, and bond warrant 34. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have public comment. Floor is open for public comment.
Hello, Shauna Goodall from Orono High School. I would just like to give a great thanks and acknowledgement, well overdue, for all of the people who contributed to our pasta drive over our March sort of winter carnival spring fling. National Honor Society ran it, and I thought we would get like maybe 100 pounds of pasta to help support our food pantry at Orono High School. Not the Orono community overwhelmed us with, at the final count, 413 pounds of pasta and sauce, which overwhelmed the guidance office at the high school in a fortunate experience. And we were good, had so much pasta that we also gave it to the food pantries at the middle school, and I think at Asa Adams as well. Asa, come on up and grab some, I think, if you need anything. So thank you to everybody who contributed. Thank you to the students who helped organize and collect and clean up the guidance office afterwards. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment?
We, the board did receive an email from a couple of members of the Orono community that couldn't be at attendance at the meeting tonight, but that agreed to have their email read with attribution. So I'll go ahead and read that in during public comment. This email comes from Rob Wheeler and Nevis Dalbo Wheeler, and it starts off, it says, hi all. We wanted to write a quick note in support of continuing with the sports at OHS this spring. During this long year, being able to play soccer, ski on the Nordic team, run track and canoe has kept their children sane, and we encourage you to keep supporting sports as you indicated in the last board meeting. RSU 26 has been doing a great job of keeping our children safe, and we are sure that the staff and coaches will continue to do the same throughout the spring season. We won't be able to attend the school board meeting tomorrow, but wanted to make sure to let you know where we stand. So just wanted to put that in for the record and thank Rob and Nevis for reaching out with their views on that.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello, this is Kaula Wise.
Yeah, Hala, go ahead.
I am very much want to say thank you for opening the spring sport for the kids. It's really important to have outdoor sports for the kids.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Any other public comment? Give it one last chance. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Next up, we have reports. We start with principal reports. Nope. What did I miss? Oh, acknowledgements, sorry. Next up is acknowledgements. Aaron, any acknowledgements?
I'd like to acknowledge the show choir who did a performance. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it, but I'm sure it was wonderful. And I know they put a lot of work into trying to get that to happen.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, so I did go to the show choir performance, which was great. Aaron, you took that one, so I'll move to the next one on my list. I'd like to acknowledge Mrs. Dill and Sarah Kenny. They're doing a program, Adopt a Senior, in which people from the community are giving support to seniors as they reach the finish line with graduation. You know, just something special given the environment they're in right now. So I just wanted to thank them for that.
Great. Patrick, any acknowledgements?
Yeah, I just wanted, especially this week, to thank the folks who keep the little ones safe during drop off and pick up at Asa Adams. It's kind of a wild environment there sometimes when the parents are trying to get kids to school on time. And I think that everyone involved in keeping the kids safe is doing a really good job. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
I don't have anything to add. I also enjoyed the show choir presentation. Meredith?
I would like to acknowledge the OHS Social Studies Department, Shauna Goodall, Matthew Terrell, and Dave Hamill. They approached Brian and I to offer to help revise the student board application process and selection criteria, well, application process, to try to make that something that's less intimidating maybe for students to get a good pull, and helped us just reframe our thinking as we consider, you know, our timeline for moving forward on that right away. So thank you to the three of them for their work and initiative to help us with that.
Great. Any other acknowledgements we missed? All right, now we're on to principal reports. So we'll start with Kristen.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I want to just start first by saying thank you to Karen Martin. Has done such a great job, I know, with getting all the immunizations all in line. I had my second one today, and it's such a great feeling to have that behind me. And so I wanted to say that real quick before I popped into my report. So as you can see, things are going amazing at ASA. It is ASA amazing after all. I was invited into Mrs. Dreyer's class, first grade class, to learn more about camouflage. And Mrs. Earhart and I were pretending we were the hungry birds looking for the moths. It was adorable. And, you know, they really didn't want us to find them, but at the same time they did. It was great. So they learned a lot about that. It was a great hands-on experience. And Miss Oldenburg's second grade classroom is learning more about vocabulary and those becoming word collectors. And so they interviewed me. They were great about it. And to see them watching me and writing down every single word that, you know, they think that would be an important word collected word for their word collection was amazing. So it was fun to be visiting those two classrooms. Our second trimester, I'm sorry, I miswrote that. It's for our second trimester report cards went out. I can't believe we're already into the third trimester. And those went out, and I just wanted to say thank you to all the teachers that put so much time and effort into them. And the comments were great. So I know that we just spent quite a bit of time talking about what we did for the 18th and 19th for our professional development days. One of the things we started talking a little bit about, and we didn't really finish, was talking about the kindergarten and first grade portion of the NWEAs. It looks a lot different than what you would see from the other, the grades 2 through 5 type of NWEA testing. It's much more animated. It presents more as an app that they would use. And they do it on their iPad. So I believe will see it more as a game. So I'm excited to see how they do with that. The building project is really coming along. I was watching today as I was walking around during recess duty. They're doing the bricks around the pillars on the front, and the brickwork is done on the bottom. They were pressure washing it, cleaning it up. It was looking so nice, just so professional looking. I'm super excited. They had some of the doors open to the classrooms. So as the kids were walking by, they were looking in, like you could see the tile on the floor. They're tiling some of the new classrooms. Just amazing to see how many things are just falling into place. And then the last thing I wanted to say was thank you to our RSU 26 kitchen staff. We were provided breakfast on Friday morning, and it was lovely. It was a great way to start off our day.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to OMS with Richard.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My report tonight hits sort of a celebratory tone and heavy on kind of instructional themes, the things that are going on around OMS. And I want to start off by on March 20th, we had a wonderful trip to Greenville to the ski mountain there, and it was just one of those perfect, rare Maine spring skiing days that only comes around once in a while. But many thanks to Chad Kirkpatrick and Kristen Espling, who organized that fun Saturday. It was just a great day, and that was previously like it was rescheduled from a previous date. But I think we hit it right on that particular day with the weather for sure. I want to recognize Mrs. Gagne, Jessica Gagne, our OMS special education teacher, who came to us right about the time we went into the pandemic last year in the spring. And she has done a great job fitting in under unusual circumstances. And so hats off to her as she's being reassigned to help the ASA staff down the hill. So, but she did a great job for us. Happy to report that quarter 4, we've gone back to orchestra class. So we've kind of done a rotation. We started off the year with how did we go? We had band, orchestra, orchestra, band, and the orchestra again, fourth quarter. So it was kind of a flip back and forth. So it's great to have Mr. Caballero back and hear the sounds coming out of the room down there. Our 6th graders recently participated in the virtual archaeology day. Now this is it's a visit to the university, and it's in collaboration with the Hudson Museum at the University of Maine. But they did a nice job with the virtual presentation this year, and we learned about a lot of different things. I spent some time in the 6th grade classrooms. And one real takeaway was middens, these piles of shells that Native American peoples have left. And the largest midden in the United States north of Georgia is located in Maine. That was an interesting tidbit, sort of a dump area for shells. So that was a fun day, and I think it was a big success. Our postcard for friendship project, the year-long project with Mr. Tatunik is ongoing. We're approaching the end of this project, but it's generated a lot of interest in old-fashioned postcard writing and exchange back and forth with our friends in Ukraine and Russia. And on March 30th, just recently, we had to accommodate for the time zone change. I think 12 hours difference, I think it was. And so students came in before school, and it was late in the afternoon in Moscow, and we had a video conference, a Zoom meeting, and it was a lot of fun. So I got to meet the lead teacher in that school. And the interesting thing is they're going through exactly the same things we are here, mask wearing and quarantine, and they're having ups and downs, with COVID. So it was a good experience actually seeing them face to face. Hats off to Mr. Buhner and Mr. Wagstaff at OHS. We have our 8th graders registered for high school classes. And so this is a big step for our 8th graders as we move into quarter 4 and, kind of as they getting them ready for for their next step in their educational process. So nice to have that taken care of. And I'm happy to report our second vaccination clinic is coming this Saturday at noon in the OMS gym, and that's going to give 101, I believe, individuals their second shot of the Moderna vaccination. So that's a nice milestone to reach. And my final thing is our spring sports is underway. We've been doing softball, baseball, and track. Baseball, softball inside, and I'm happy to report that at our recent Penobscot Valley Middle League meeting with the league officials, principals, and ADs in the league, all schools in the Penobscot Valley Middle League are participating if they're able to field a team, if they have numbers. So it's the first sport this year that we're able to have full participation of all league members. And that's what I have for this evening.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I had a question. Is there plans for us to do the step up day for the fifth graders later
Yes.
this year, or?
Yes, Jake, that's a great question. We're currently planning that, we're working on that today, as a matter of fact. So we're working on, Mr. Buhner and I are going down to meet the fifth grade classes on May 6th and 7th, I believe. And then we're working on a plan to hopefully have them come up here and visit, so we got to work out the logistics of that. And then we're at next week's staff meeting, we're going to be talking about how we're going to have the parent component as a piece of that. I think last year we tried out some virtual options for the parent meetings, and I think we may expand enhanced virtual opportunities for the parents, but we want to get the kids here in person if at all possible. And so planning is underway for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. Richard opened his report by thanking Chad Kirkpatrick and Kristen Espling for leading the ski trip, which is absolutely the case. Students had a great time, but I also wanted to add that students that I talked to, and I had one that was on the trip, thought it was pretty cool that, as they said, Dr. G showed up to ski with them. So that was that was pretty cool. So they appreciated that.
Thank you. It was a fun day.
Anything else? We'll go ahead and move on to Reg with the high school.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to start. I want to recognize Tommaso Wheeler, who was selected by the Foreign Language Association of Maine, as FLAME is their acronym. And he received the Student Recognition Award, which is basically their Student of the Year. They award it to one high school student throughout the state, and Tommaso won that award. So that's a big deal. And it's our second or third student over the last 4 or 5 years to receive that award. So it really speaks highly of our language teachers, Angela Slade, Chris Crocker, and Jay Hubbard. Just a consistently high expectations for our students, and they perform really well with their teachers. So congratulations, Tommaso. Also want to acknowledge science teacher Jen Branchflower and a group of students that she entered into the Maine State Science Fair. So the first year since I've been principal that we've entered the science fair, and it was virtual this year, but I want to continue that as we move forward. Ruth White won 3rd place with an environmental science project, and she also received the NASA Earth Systems Science Award. And then James Wheeler and Anna Malloy worked on a project together, and they won the REACH Award, which recognizes outstanding research and engineering projects. So congratulations to those guys. I also want to recognize alternative ed teacher Cammie Carter and science teacher Zach Arnold. They were both nominated for County Teacher of the Year awards. And I just learned this week that Cammie Carter has actually moved on to the next round, which is either a semifinalist or a finalist. So congratulations there as well. I want to mention our February students of the month, our 9th grader Adela Maybe from Bangor, 10th grader Eridiah Smith from Glenburn, 11th grade Alexis Marshall from Orono, then 12th grader Aaron Gerby from Orono, and also our English teacher of the month, our February teacher of the month, which is English teacher Erica Dixon. So congratulations, Erica, well deserved there. We'll be mailing home report cards. The Q3 ended on Friday, giving a little extra time for teachers to get grades in as we just switch over to a new quarter. And so we'll be mailing those home next Monday, the 12th. Update on our enrollment numbers as far as in-person, hybrid, and remote. The seniors came back, at least those who wanted to come back in person, full in person. That started this week. So we have 177 students that are full in person, 105 hybrid, and then 90 who are full remote. So that's our highest number of full in person all year. And we're expecting another 24 sophomores and 28 juniors when we return from April vacation. No issues to report this week. We didn't have to relocate any classes. The class sizes have all been fine. We did add some desks to one classroom, and that just changed the spacing from 5.5 feet down to 4 feet. And so no issues there. I also want to highlight our spring sports participation numbers. This isn't anything new, to have these high numbers, but this year it's especially encouraging that, speaks highly of Mike Archer as our athletic director and leader for our sports, but also our coaches. We're super lucky to have a high number of teachers who are also coaches. And we just have really healthy numbers across all our teams. We have 29 in baseball. We have 30 playing softball, 17 on boys tennis, 19 on girls tennis, 28 running track, and 16 on the canoe team. So it's around 140 total there. So just really encouraged that our students remain highly engaged, and they just really want to participate and stay active. So that's great. And then final couple things. We already talked plenty about the NWEA, but really want to give Meredith Diamond just really recognize the job that she did on that March 19th Teacher in Service Day, where for the high school is really the first time that as a full staff that we've talked about the NWEA and dove into the data. And so it was just really well organized and well presented. So nice job, Meredith. And then finally, next week, we are administering a school day SAT on Tuesday, April 13th. This is optional, but about 40 juniors have signed up to take that. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Reg, I had a question with the SATs. I know we reviewed in the last work group about moving to NWEAs from SATs, but going forward, what's the, it used to be that it was a required test for all 11th graders and we paid for it, but what's the stance as we go forward for SATs for sophomore, juniors, especially, I guess, some seniors too?
Yeah, so this spring, I imagine we'll carry this forward. We're paying for it, but it's optional for juniors. At least we made it optional this year for the school day SAT. And then in the fall, we're going to continue with the PSAT for all sophomores and all juniors. And that will be a requirement. We'll pay for that, but it'll be a requirement for all the 10th and 11th graders to take that in the fall.
And do we know if we'll continue to offer it for the juniors with payment in the year following, next spring?
Yep, that's the plan. We're not making it. We're not making it a requirement in the spring. I mean,
right.
For that one, it's just
So the only change really is it's
gone juniors.
Sorry, yeah. So the only change is it's gone from required to optional
for the spring. Yeah.
For the spring, yeah. Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have our perennial agenda item, COVID update and discussion. Meredith can kick us off on that.
I have a couple items to report in my superintendent's report before we jump into that.
Sorry.
But it's somewhat related. to COVID, but not completely. One that's not, I want to just report we have a resignation. Our varsity OHS girls basketball coach resigned this week. And so we'll start the advertising process for that. And we thank Coach Donato for his service to the district and wish him well in his future endeavors. I wanted though to primarily report on some information I learned last Friday at a conference I attended at MSMA sponsored, Maine School Management Association. And this is the conference that's primarily or typically focused on budget issues. This year, certainly that was a portion of it, but it was also more broadly kind of themed around relief packages, what's happening at the federal level, what's looking like it's going to happen, and then looking to fall for just sharing with colleagues about planning for fall under COVID. So I would say, one of the interesting parts of the day, we had someone from the National Superintendents Association, a lobbyist, who just gave us a rundown of the relief packages and deadlines and dates. And that's not new information, but since we've last met, we actually got our allocation for ESSER 3, which is kind of related to this whole piece. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So we have 3 funds under ESSER, and then we had 2 CRF packages. So those are kind of the different relief packages. So all total now, we're up to 5 relief packages. So CRF is winding down. Really, we're just spending the last few dollars of those on some, planned items that we knew we could spend down those funds. So really, we're shifting our focus to the 3 ESSER funds. ESSER 1 is what came out initially as CARES, was around $94,000, and then we received ESSER 2, I think November, December, and we didn't receive it. We just learned of it. Actually, not November, December. That's been, I think, January. We learned of that one, and that one in total is $389,000. And now ESSER 3, that's in this last package, the ARP, the relief plan that just came out. That relief package is $873,000. And so with each of the ESSER relief packages, it extends out another year, which is nice because the ESSER 1 goes through January of 22. ESSER 2 goes through January of 2020. No, sorry, September. All these go through September. September 2022 for ESSER 1, September 2023 for ESSER 2, and September of 2024 for ESSER 3. And so one of the things that this lobbyist who knows a lot about the relief packages was just giving us more advice on that funding cliff, and just to be very careful that we're not creating a funding cliff like we saw back when districts received relief money back when we had the recession. So things like adding positions that you plan to have in perpetuity, you really need to be cautious not to do too much of that because you create a cliff with that. So items like our summer, more robust summer programs we're developing, we plan on using relief funds to help pay for those. We're looking at adding some more social work services, to help students who need more support during this time. So relief money can pay for that. We've already talked about some of the other things we're going to be doing, like continuing our nursing assistant, continuing our tech assistant, continuing the core ed tech so that program can have expanded capacity. So those are all pieces that are we're using relief money for. But we're in the process of developing our plan for how we're going to use the remainder of this money. And so we really want to pace out a plan that strategically stretches these dollars as long as possible to be able to use these strategically, for several years to come. One thing about the ESSER 3 that's a different nuance is that 20% of your allocation has to be addressing student learning loss. and there's still some parameters that we've yet to learn about any requirements under those. So we had planned, certainly our summer programming is part of that. We hope that the summer programming can be a part of meeting that requirement, but we'll learn more in the coming weeks and month probably. Something else we learned in her presentation, some things like highlighting what is coming, what they see coming up in Washington related to education. It's looking like the federal DOE is going to tackle the Title IX changes to get those repealed. You recall we had to do a lot of policy work. There were lots of changes to mainly around sexual harassment and definitions and responses. It's looking like that's all going to be repealed, which takes a more protective stance to repeal those back for victims. Also, it's looking like the federal DOE is going to take some action in the form of probably more guidance on transgender students and athletes. That's certainly an issue that you're hearing a lot about in the national media. And finally, you've also heard about this in the national media, the infrastructure plan. There's a big piece of that, if that goes through, for school construction and the Build Back Better plan, I think it's what it's called. So one of the points was, if you're considering using your ESSER funds for facility projects, just keep an eye on the fact there may be a lot more money available down the road for the new infrastructure funds that are coming out for this. They did say though that some of those funds are targeted to more high poverty areas, which we don't end up being very competitive for. But I do think just having more money for this in our state is a good thing, that we might see the state ramp up more cycles for construction and renovation awards. Obviously, we're in the middle of a big renovation now, but I know everyone on the board is probably aware that we have put the middle school aside in hopes of being able to apply for a large award to renovate or replace the middle school in the near future. So that caught my interest. And then another part of that is high-speed broadband infrastructure. And we do have students who've really struggled with remote because of connectivity. And so I think in our state, that's a really big part that could really help our state around more equitable connectivity. So hopefully that will pass. So that was, to me, some interesting and helpful news that we learned. Also, there was a legislative update, and there's certainly a lot of bills. There's a backlog of bills really because of last year and how the session was just got cut short really. So the legislature is returning later in April to work through some of these bills, and then everything else will be pushed to next session. Since the budget passed last week, they're not going to be really spending a lot of time working on budget, so they'll be really focused on bills. And I'll keep you posted as I learn more. So there's certainly bills in all realms. So we'll just follow those and see what happens there. If I get a nice, concise summary, I'll send that along to you. I think now, unless you have any questions about that, we can shift to our COVID discussion.
I just had one really quick question. You mentioned that we're not considered a low-income district. Are we considered a rural district?
We are not. We are just barely too close to Bangor to be considered rural. Like, just, I don't know, 10 miles away from us north is considered rural. So there are some special funds that districts get if they're considered rural, and we do not qualify for that. So shifting to that discussion item for COVID, Richard mentioned our second vaccine clinic is this Saturday. And as Kristen mentioned, a number of employees are also seeking vaccines outside of our clinic we sponsored. And last count, we had around 78% of our staff, including all coaches, subs, everyone, who are either fully vaccinated or in progress. So, that really is a part of, what I think helps us feel comfortable with next steps that we've talked about, like at the high school. And like with the 5th grade, having Richard and Peter go down to meet with the 5th grade, we're going to be allowing more staff to work cross district, cross school, as we, have that critical mass of staff vaccinated after April vacation. So we certainly look forward to that. Reg mentioned the Q4 data. I mean, what's also been interesting to me, and we'll do an updated kind of summary page for you next time, but the full remote is also trending down now. So even the freshmen who've been in person for now, this is their 4th week because they were ended the last semester or last quarter in that full in-person rotation. Just the switch to 4th quarter, they saw students coming from both full remote and hybrid into full in-person. So there is a trend. Same thing happened with the senior class. A lot of students went from hybrid to full in-person, but also, in every grade level, students are moving from remote over into those other in-person lanes. So that's another trend we're seeing. And, I appreciated Reg's report to just give you a picture of what it's looking like right now as they've, now up at 177. That's, the next highest amount we've had in that full in-person at any time so far has been 122. So that's a good significant jump. And they're saying that things are working well. Lunch was probably the thing that had to be figured out the most. They've got that worked out. And with temperatures, on our side now moving forward, it's going to become, even more accommodating for us as we return from April break and have that last group coming back to full in person. So I feel like, the high school's in good shape, and the other schools are moving forward kind of without issue at this point. So I think they're into a rhythm, and we hope, knocking on my table here, to be able to keep some momentum. And that kind of relates to the next thing I just wanted to just mention. I know the board has seen the emails I've sent out about the changes in the close contact identification. And, one of the reasons that I really felt like that was a great change was just that momentum that some students, some families over and over got, the bad luck of being in the classes kind of multiple times in a row, particularly at the high school through the winter when we had kind of repeated, cases that were happening. And it's just really disruptive to the point that families were saying, we're just going to go remote. This is too disruptive and too difficult to have this back and forth, and felt so out of control. So I think it's going to help us be more precise and help students have a more consistent attendance experience at school. We've been in some discussions, and thank Patrick for kind of bringing this to our attention and thinking about it, about our notification process, where previously we had been under the guidance notifying everyone in a classroom that they were a close contact, and doing then the full school email that just indicated the case and then to the district. But the question was, will we still notify everyone in the class of the positive case, or just the students who are now the more precise close contacts, where we can do that, which is probably not at ASA, probably the middle and high schools where we have the opportunity to do that. And those are the schools that have had the most disruption also as a result of close contact quarantines. So in talking with the admin team and the school nurse, I think everyone agrees that that's something that we can and should do. And so it'll probably look a little different than the close contact notification. It'll probably be, a special email that we send to those families to let them know before we send out the email to the whole population, if we can do that, that they were in a class where there was where there was a positive case, but their child is not considered a close contact, so they can make a choice about how to handle that. So that, just to follow up, Patrick, you had that question, and since we emailed earlier today, I got that feedback. So we will be notifying all of that. We can't really get more specific than that still. And, we're trying to protect identities and confidentiality. So, when families have had questions, and I've been on the other end of the phone with families who have a lot of questions sometimes when we call them, we try to tell them everything we can, but there certainly is a line that we try not to cross. And so we'll continue to do that. I think the other thing that we have been working on, two things really, continuing our summer programming planning, and Meredith and Lisa have been taking that conversation further. We've just recently advertised for a program coordinator, trying to get a little more definition around the programming and coordinating that with our staff and with UMaine for that partnership. And I think our goal is very soon to have letters going out to families for students who were nominated for the program, to get a head count on those. And that will really tell us how many extra seats that we might have available in addition to that. So planning is ongoing for that. But probably the biggest new aspect of planning is around fall planning. Something else that I mentioned from the conference on Friday, and really the last couple of weeks of our Pinquist regional meetings, and we talked about it at curriculum committee meeting last week, and there's been follow-up conversations at school levels about how we transition into next year, and particularly how and if we offer continued option for remote learning. And so we've been having all of these discussions, and what we've learned really is that a lot of places around the state are looking at this from a regional perspective of trying to have some regional efforts to provide remote instruction. Because one of the key considerations I think we have to think about is how to develop something that's a sustainable model. I mean, I think staff has been doing an admirable job this year, but I do know there's a limit to how much and how long we can continue with kind of this multi-mode, teaching to the iPad, to the kids at home, teaching to the kids here. And I just don't think that's a sustainable model for us. So I think we're having a regional conversation in the Pinquist region next week at our Spruce meeting. Spruce is an organization that already helps us run a regional program, the Bangor regional program. So I think it's the ideal place to maybe consider, do we want to develop a regional remote learning option for students? We're really mostly looking at that approach for high school, maybe middle school. And, our feedback from staff, and this relates back to our data presentation we just had, there's not a lot of confidence that remote learning is the right answer for our youngest learners. And there's not a lot of support for continuing to offer remote for our K-5 population here in our district. And that's really, as I listen to conversations around our region, that's one of the prevailing feelings, is that for those students, we really need to work hard to get students back in person, because the difference in the experience is so vast between a younger student and an older student. And I would say the other thing that we're talking about as we start these conversations is what criteria will be used to determine if a student is eligible for accessing remote learning, and what criteria will be used to determine if you are accessing it, if you should be able to continue that. So looking at finding criteria that matches the right student with that mode for the right reasons to make sure it's a supportive and successful model. And so we're engaged with that work right now. Certainly, you know, this kind of effort, our relief funds could help us fund this kind of partnership. So I don't really think it's a budgetary consideration. I think it's more of a consideration of, you know, what do we think is the right approach for our students next year? So, you know, I will bring back more information, and certainly, you know, our staff at large and, you know, our curriculum committee will continue to be engaged in that discussion. I know I've talked a lot, so. Any feedback, questions, comments?
Yeah, I really like what I'm hearing, that if we're going to continue with remote learning, maybe find a way to pool resources to do it really well for those for whom it's a really good option. I guess the biggest question I have around it is, do we have a kind of two-pronged approach where, you know, in pathway one, there's no pandemic to worry about by fall and everything looks great. And in pathway two, we're still dealing with things at the same level we're dealing with it now. And then also, you know, how do immunizations come into play here when looking at remote learning? You know, I can see if there is a decision by the state to require COVID immunization for all students, then that kind of takes away a lot of the concerns around health and COVID safety with remote learning. And then you might still be looking at, you know, kids for whom they actually did better on remote learning and having a regional model for them to set that up. But what do we do in the case where we're still kind of have this low level burn of pandemic? I mean, we're about the same rate now we were last November, which at the time didn't seem like it was low, and maybe we should just gotten used to it. But if that's still going on throughout the summer and throughout the fall, and we have kids going to school who have not been immunized in the fall, to me, that's like, those are like two different scenarios. Do you see what I'm saying with that? So I guess my question is, are we developing two parallel approaches for these two different scenarios for this?
Well, I think that's a question I really don't have an answer to, whether we're going to sustain a remote option post-pandemic, post, you know, this being compelled by really the circumstance of the pandemic. I don't have an answer to that, except to say that, and someone else had this response that I heard them say, and I really, it resonated with me, is that, you know, I don't think that we as a district, and I think many public school districts feel that way, can be all things to all people. And we're not expert, certainly, at virtual instruction. They're schools, charter schools, other schools, you know, national kind of companies who do virtual instruction expertly. That's their business. And so I think in a post-pandemic world, that's the key question for us. Are we going to try to be expert and compete with these companies who do this full-time? Or are we going to say, you know, we do this really well. We do in-person instruction really well. We provide a, you know, a broad program and to have excellent programming in lots of areas for our students in person. And that's what we're going to remain focused on. I have an opinion, but I'm not going to tell you that. I think, you know, that's a discussion for our community to have. In terms of where we are in between now and then, I think if we're where we are now, I think we have to have some option for families to access remote instruction. And how that intersects with required immunizations or not, that's an even stickier wicket that I don't know the answer to, right? So I'm not hearing those kinds of indications coming from our meetings with the commissioner. I'm not hearing that that's a movement happening. Maybe it is, and I'm just not aware. I think certainly people are wondering about it, but I'm not hearing any kind of movement that it's actually happening. I think we would have to be further along with even research around children. And I know that's happening, but you know, that's still just not even the case with under what 16 still is not eligible this time. So, you know, as I said, I feel like for middle and high school, we feel like that's something that this regional approach might be a good solution for elementary. You know, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but if we're where we are now, if things have not improved, I think that's a real something we're going to have to grapple with. Do we develop something ourselves for elementary? And I'm not sure that I would say it's going to be expert or high quality, because I think the ASA staff who's doing that says themselves, look, there's a lot that our students are missing compared to what they get in a in-person experience if they are in remote instruction. And that doesn't feel good to them. They don't like that. They want to see kids return if possible. So, you know, as we move forward, we learn a ton, right? We know so much more about what works and what doesn't work than we did a year ago. And if we choose to continue this, I'm sure we'll become more expert. But, you know, I think there comes that time when we have to ask ourselves, which path are we going to go down? And that answer is probably different community by community. And I don't have all the answers, but we're starting to explore that whole arena.
Have we explored this with the families that have chosen full remote? I mean, I think that's, you know, if the answer from the families that are choosing full remote currently is that, hey, if we still have to be doing this next fall, we would love to be in a situation where we can draw upon national expertise for the best possible remote learning. And if that's what the families want, then I'd love to see us pursue that. And if the families are saying, we really don't want that to happen, we are in Orono for a reason, and even though this might be another year for us being remote, we still want to have these connections with our school, then I think that would help us go in a different direction. I'd really like to take cues from the families on that.
Yeah, I mean, that we've talked about doing that. We plan to do that. That's a part of what's ahead of us. We felt like we weren't quite ready to do it. Because I think we wanted to, in particular at the high school, see how this change impacted our remote numbers. I think they've been pretty stable at ASA and middle school. I mean, we've had movement in and out, certainly, but it's been less, we've certainly seen less fluctuations. So I think once we get into post-April vacation, that we would be ready to survey those families to gather some information. But, you know, I completely agree that hearing from those families is an important part of the planning process.
Great, thank you.
I do think it's important to draw a distinction between plans around remote learning for next year, which is a transition year, and long-term. And they may be different plans, probably. Well, I don't know. Possibly, quite possibly, are different plans. What we're talking about 2 or 3 years out versus just next year. As we, you know, as the vaccine hopefully is transitioning, and you know, also as parents and people's attitudes are transitioning. So I just think it's important to draw that distinction between, you know, what we do for next year is not necessarily going to be the offering for 2, 3, 4 years out either. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think that moves us on to budget.
So last week or 2 weeks ago, we looked at budget documents that have now been updated. So in your packet, you have some updated figures on the same format, though, the same 3 documents that we use to frame our conversations. So I guess I wanted to start with what's changed, just to highlight that. So you kind of had an idea of what's different between the last documents we looked at and what you see now. I mentioned this at the last meeting, but it wasn't reflected in the documents, and now it is. Our initial insurance reduction from what we projected as a ceiling for ourselves was at 9%. And when the ceiling was set by Anthem and came to us, it was 4.2. So we were able to take out that amount from our budget, and that was a savings of, well, lower 80,000s. When we combined that with some other benefit election changes that had been coming in over, these couple of weeks, that totaled a new difference compared to the last time. The last time we were showing an increase of 86,597. And so our new numbers are showing that decrease has gone down to a reduction of $21,035 on taxes. So the net change was around $107,000 reduction. So around, an additional $27,000 or so was that just, some benefit election changes and small things that we found with some pluses and minuses. So that's where it stands now. That's the biggest thing that changed. And we have several decisions before us to kind of fine tune this so that the next meeting we can bring you really what you need to vote on, unless you want to make changes there on the fly that night. So where we are in the budget process, just to remind you, tonight's the night where you usually give us some final direction and guidance, and we bring that back to our late April meeting for you to say either, yep, that looks good, or we're going to make this change and we're going to decide on that right now and vote on it. Because the next meeting after that, which is, I want to say the first week of May, is when we bring you the warrant articles to sign. So that's what, where we are in the process. So at this point, I have three main things plus a fourth that's not exactly tied up in this budget, but it's related to it, that we need to figure out. And those four things, I'll just list them off, then we can circle back to them, are more discussion about insurance, more discussion about the MILTI and how that intersects with the larger than normal carryover we have as a result of the year we've been in. Not really decision, but an update around the kindergarten enrollment and knowing what that could look like. And then the fourth thing that's not exactly related to this budget, but it certainly is related overall, is figuring out what to do about the money we budgeted this year for our bond project that we're not using toward the ban, and figuring out where to put that money. If we put it toward the project this year, or if we put it over in capital reserve, or if we let it roll to unassigned. Those are really the three choices of that. So those are the four things we need to figure out. And we have, since we met last week, some new information on all of those to circle back and share with you. Brian, are those the four things? Was there something else?
Sounds right.
Okay, and I think Lynn's on the call. So Lynn, jump in if you have additional items. And just one other note of clarification that I know Lynn might be thinking about sharing is Lynn's been monitoring the high school tuition students enrollment. And right now it's looking right on track to be what has been projected, which probably means we're going to go over that. But, it feels, very safe to be where we are, because I think we're at a point where we feel very comfortable that we're going to get the number of tuition students we've budgeted for. Would you agree with that, Lynn and Reg? Okay. So the news with insurance. So last meeting I said we got our ceiling. Yesterday we got our actual rate increase. And I'm shocked and pleased to tell you that our rate increase is 0. I don't, think in recent history we've had a 0% rate increase. I look back over time and I think our average over the last 6 or so years is like mid-4, because we've had years of 9, and we've had, I don't have the numbers pulled up, but really nothing even close to 0. So that's really great news. So given that, we have a decision to make about what to do. That amount of the difference between 4.2% and 0% increase is about $82,000. And there's some, pros and cons to leaving that in or taking it out of our current budget. So the pro would be taking it out. It goes into more reductions in that final number of the increase or decrease. I would say the con of doing that is that we typically don't usually make this second adjustment. Usually it's around, maybe 1 or 2% difference from what the ceiling was. And sometimes it's so late in the process that we leave it in there because it is not usually something that we're trying to solve a problem with, and it gives us just a little more flexibility in the budget. Lynn and Sue were telling me in their memories, the only time we've ever taken it out at this juncture was when we were trying to solve a problem, trying to eliminate reductions that were on the table. And next year, when we build our budget, that, we'd love to think we're going to stay at a 0% increase, but I don't think we can plan for that certainly. And so our projection will take us right back up, and who knows where we'll land. So I guess the benefit of leaving it in is it helps us not to have big fluctuations in our insurance budgeting as we even start the process next year. Because if we add, if we even go 7 or 8% over where we are this year, which it's just, we've never gone really too much below where we are now since I've been here. Because I think when I came in, that was the year we'd just been hit with a 9%. And maybe we only had 8% in the budget that year for our projection. So it just feels really risky to bring that all the way down to 0. And then when we budget next year, have to take it back up and have this big, gap we're trying to close to cover a potential bounce back up. So that's one of the considerations. And I think this one is related to the next one about Milty, and it's also related to the one about kindergarten teacher. So
If I could just,
go. No,
I mean, on the insurance, one way to think about that is we're time averaging the increases, right? If we have 0% this year, but we budget 4%, and then next year we have 8%, we have that 4% already built in. So we're really only having to put 4% in next year. So it's a little bit of a bad hedging or, time averaging strategy on increases. Yeah, we had a really good year this year, but if we build all of that out, and then we have a really bad year next year is going to look that much worse. But if we keep part of the good year and part of the good year out, which is what we're doing right now, it's kind of averaging over time, the increases, which is probably, in my opinion, a good place to be.
no, I was going to say, unless we plan on spending it somewhere else, which I think is what you might be getting to next, it would just go into carry forward if we left it in, right?
that's right. Well, yes, that's right.
Yeah, this year's money would pop out and carry forward, but the expense budget number would have some of next year's increase built into it. Yep.
Another positive of putting in is something that I always like to think about is we never know when people are going to change insurances. And when you have someone that goes from not taking our insurance to a full family or even single to full family, that can be a big change in insurance numbers. And having that little bit extra there is just helps that. I mean, yes, we have contingency, but this is targeted at insurances just in case for those ups and downs. I mean, it can go either way, but going to the absolute 0 makes me a little bit, I'm feeling a little bit unsafe with changes, but we never know. We could have changes all in our favor, which is what we'd love. But I think that's another benefit of keeping just that little bit of wiggle there.
Lynn, those changes are time bound, right? I mean, I assume like we have an open enrollment period, I'm assuming. So, you have to make your selection by a certain date, and then after that, you can't change it again till the next open enrollment. Am I correct? But again, I'm guessing it's not before the budget. So
Well, we do have an open enrollment, but there are certain changes you can do at any time during the year that are considered, life changes, a change in a job, birth of a child, there are situations, and we do have it happen every year, that happens all throughout the year. A new employee come, change an employee would have a different insurance. So really there are qualifying events that they're called that happen all year. The big changes are during open enrollment, and a lot of times we know those. We ask ahead of time, is anyone planning to change? And people who know let us know, but we can't control the qualifying events.
Has open enrollment also been extended for this year through midsummer? I mean, I read about this, but I don't remember the dates, but I seem to remember that maybe that was just for the federal exchange plans. I don't know if that applied to all insurance.
I don't think it applied to ours.
Okay, great.
So that's one aspect. And I feel like we should probably get through the list and then have a discussion about how to put all this together. The second piece is around Milty. We talked last time about our around 400,000 year-end projected balance that's above our contingency, that was really caused by the fact that we've had so much relief money this year. People haven't been going to conferences and travel. People haven't been, we haven't had as many substitutes. There's just a number of factors that a couple times a week, Lynn or Sue step into my office and say, and there's this other thing. So there's like a growing list of things that they're finding are just different about this year. So in thinking about that money, we had talked last time about, could that be a way for us to have some sustained tax relief around our Milty buy-in that we're about to enter into. We still don't have the information. It's not due out until late this month. So we've really just projected, and I think actually our projection, as I have looked at it more closely with Lynn, I think it's a little low. I think it actually might be a little higher, but it's just so hard to know. At any rate, we had talked about maybe utilizing this new reserve account, the expanded kind of eligibility for different reserve accounts that you can set up. And that would be one approach to putting this money, this 400,000 in reserve accounts, and each year paying either all of our Milty payment or as much as we could out of that account. The other thing that I asked or I think Jake, you asked about the bulk purchase, like one-time purchase, and they do not allow that. So it has to be this amortized, 4-year finance program if we go with them, which I think we should. And so that was one idea. And then Brian, you had another idea. You want to talk about that idea?
It's pretty much the same idea, except just to leave it parked in general reserves instead of putting it into a particular account and then drawing it out, which just, I think, gives us a little more flexibility about the money, but it's really the same, right? The reserve, if we had a multi-reserve account, it's still going to be sitting in the same bank account. It's just a bookkeeping difference. But I guess I personally would probably argue to do that plan where we say we have 400,000 extra because of COVID that we're going to be carrying out, but let's just leave it in the general account. And we're just going to commit to spend the 100, 110, 120,000 of that each of the next 4 years. So it'll draw that reserve back down by that 400,000, and it'll reduce the taxes for the next 4 years by that 100,000 because we won't be paying Multi out of the operating. We'll be paying it out. We'll be paying it out of the operating budget, but it'll be coming out, not out of tax revenue, be coming out of the general reserve fund. So it's really the same thing as a reserve account, except it's a unrestricted fund as opposed to a restricted fund.
Yeah, it's basically just putting it in our unassigned account. and each year increasing our balance forward line by whatever we want to do to offset Milty that year. So that's another way to have this kind of sustained tax relief over, a period of time and spend down this money so that we don't, continue to have our unassigned balance creep up. And that doesn't require an extra warrant article like the reserve account requires. So, as Lynn and Brian and I have talked about that, I think I've settled on, I like that option better, that of doing it that way, because each year we have flexibility to do more or less, and we're not really having to be more precise with figuring out, okay, how much do we need in the reserve account and making sure we have the right amount over there. So to me, that's a simpler approach. Or, we can do none of that and we can just leave Milty in the budget and put this 400,000 unassigned and, have, like, we've always spent our budgeted funds off of Milty. So we've never done this kind of offset or pay down with our unassigned with it. So those are all options. The K teacher, Kristen had conversations with staff, and she and I have talked, and I think there's still broad agreement that a defined number is hard to set because it depends on the makeup of that group, right? That not every group of 15 or 17 or 18 kids is the same. So it's hard to be definitive, but I think for the purpose of what we're trying to do, to have a target and to track toward that and know when we reach that threshold, we would like to set that target for this year at 17-1. If we pass that, which would be if we go above 51 in our kindergarten class and get to that 52, that we would then hire the fourth teacher and redistribute students. And so that's what we wanted to propose to you. We're still at 43. I think we were at 43 last time. So we haven't had any more in kindergarten yet. So it's just hard to know where that's going to go. I suspect I'll have more of this. I already have one superintendent agreement request for kindergarten that I'm holding on until August, because I think we need to wait and see what happens with our resident enrollment. And I predict we might get another or so of those. We typically do. So, should we need another kindergarten teacher? That's just another consideration on the budget, because, that's usually why we have contingency. We use contingency for those kinds of unbudgeted needs. And, as we think about the insurance option and what to do, and thinking about, I think the very real possibility that we might need a fourth kindergarten teacher, it feels like if there's a good chance we might spend, probably up to three quarters of our regular ed contingency on a kindergarten teacher, and we've taken the insurance number all the way down to that 0%. It just feels like there's not a lot of flexibility in our budget, that it begins to feel a little tight. And so I guess as I consider all these three together, to me, in my mind, it's kind of forming what I think is a way forward, and that is to, leave the insurance where it is now, at where we reduced last time, to go with like Brian's idea of leaving the Milty expense in the budget, but increasing the carry forward amount by an offset to that. And then should we need a kindergarten teacher, that simply comes from our contingency. And, we have some other elements in the budget, like the insurance, that we know we have some additional flexibilities there as well. So that's how all that is shaping up to me. And I know that that's a lot to take in, but that's really, to me, the three-pronged kind of consideration you have tonight to figuring out how to finish the budget. And some of that depends on how much you want to impact that increase or decrease to taxes. We talked last time about not wanting to necessarily have an up and down of tax rates, that, that's not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve something that's a little more steady and consistent. So I don't know what that means to you, but going with what I just proposed, we would have around $127,000 tax reduction, which I think Brian figured out is around 0.3 mil
0.28. Yep.
Yeah. reduction. So I open it up for your comments or questions, feedback, clarifications.
I just wanted to give one more example on the insurance. If we had an employee who had a spouse lose a job, change a job or something, I'm gonna go from cash in lieu to full family. It's $26,700 for one employee change with a big change in that direction. So, when I say that a big one change can have a big impact, that's the number that it would look like.
I will say I'm in support of what you laid out in regards to the first three items, the insurance, the MILTI, and the kindergarten enrollment. So I'm not going to repeat what you said because I'm in support of it.
I would agree. I support everything you laid out using Brian's option on the Milty. And I'd also just add that it's nice. This is probably the easiest set of budget discussions that I've been a part of as in my time on the board. Usually at this point, there's some level of consternation of what are we going to do? Are we going to have to cut this? And how can we avoid doing it? And right now we're fortunate, let's hope it stays that way, but we're not having that, which is great. So I'm in support of the options that you laid out there. And I'm assuming we're not looking at any other possibility of having to add a teacher anywhere else, right? Like we're going to add this one position at the high school. We've got that in there. We've got this kindergarten on our radar. We're going to have funds there that we could use for that. So assuming we're not anticipating adding another teacher anywhere, I'm fully supportive of this. And I say that's where I would want to go.
I think anything else we're talking about falls under our relief funds as part of, continued COVID response. And, and I would also say that I agree with you, Mark, that it's been a year like no other since I've been here. And I think it's really unusual this year when we sit in meetings and I hear other districts and what they're facing with budget talks because of their declining enrollments they had this year and what they lost on their ED 279 and how they're having to try to creatively use relief funds to fill a gap. That's a really dangerous thing to be having to do. I feel so fortunate. And, our enrollment increase at the high school certainly is a big part of that. Just the fact that our enrollment, our tuition enrollment is so strong, including special education and regular ed, that it really made this a lot easier for us compared to our neighbors.
And I think you said it, but even just our regular enrollments, right? Where the statewide trend is declines, and it's hitting people's bottom lines, but we have increases and we have, best available projections, obviously not certainty of continued increases. So I think that's a credit certainly to the town of Orono as a livable place, but a lot of it's a credit to our teachers and staff and the kind of educational product we're putting out there. And, you hope that people notice and that draws bodies in. And it seems to be happening. I mean, stepping back really big picture, we went into last year expecting it could be a disaster, right? We prepared for a state curtailment where they gave us less than they promised. We ended up in the other place, right? Mostly through the Fed, a little bit through the state budget. Certainly they have tried to protect education as best they can, and we can't complain about that. When you combine that with our increase in enrollments, that turned out positive for us, but a lot of it's the federal injections with the relief funds. But the net is, and a lot of it's just spending less money because of COVID too. Professional development's way down. A lot of expenses are way down. So we've gone from worrying about curtailment to ending up with an unusually large amount of cash at the end of this year. And I mean, we're talking about it at the level of the details, but in the end, there's two choices. We give it all back to the taxpayers this year, cut everything back to the bone. And then next year, probably we're right back to raising taxes up again. I personally feel like we've been kind of given a gift that this has turned out to be a very positive fiscal year. And I would like to use it to solidify our position over the long run for the next 3, 4, or 5 years, so that we can continue to have strong results and continue to have flat or small decreases as we go forward, as opposed to one giant, whatever it is, 1 mil give back this year and then a 1 mil increase next year. So we got lucky last year. I mean, that's just a fact at this point. And I personally think the best, most fiscally responsible thing to do with that is to set ourselves up for being fiscally strong for the next 5 years, as opposed to give it back and then to take it all back again. So, and that conforms with the plan that Meredith put forward about being a little conservative and keeping some of that insurance inside. Part of that cash is going into the multi over the next 4 years. That's an example of the strength that we can do, is pay that down for not just 1 year, but 4 years. And, and then when we're being conservative everywhere else, the contingency becomes truly what it's intended for, unexpected educational needs. So I think that all works for me. Aaron, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial to plan for the next few years, because we really don't know what's going to be happening. I mean, I think the uncertainty is even greater now than it usually is for where we'll be, next year, the year after. So I think it's smart. I would love to do, a little bit back if we can, but I think planning for the longer term is crucial right now.
So it sounds like there's a consensus on your plan, Meredith, and ends up with just under 0.3 mil tax decrease, which nobody's going to be upset about. So I think, and the other, I always try and step back. The two goals we set ourselves as a board for the budget is to manage the tax level and to manage the expense side. We don't have as much control over the revenue side, but the expense side shows a 2.7% increase, which, given that we have student enrollments increasing, I think, by about 2%, actually it works out to a below inflation increase on expenses when all is said and done. So I think that looks very fiscally careful as well. So when you have a tax cut and you have a below inflation revenue increase per capita, that sounds like a successful budget to me.
Patrick, did you have something to add? I saw you come off mute.
I mean, my inclination is to go with everything everyone was talking about. I love making things as stable as possible from a tax level, and using excesses to plan for future years and distributing that out over multiple years. The kindergarten position, of course, I think I would throw the stability as a definite secondary to, supporting students as much as possible. So I'd rather see a little more volatility than not have enough teachers, is what I'm saying. So sounds good to me.
So we will bring back, unless something significant happens that I can let you know via email, if that's something we're going to have to consider at the next meeting. We'll bring you back a budget that reflects these changes that we've talked about tonight. But the fourth thing that I mentioned earlier, the $350,000 in this fiscal year, Brian and I and Lynn reviewed some feedback from our attorney on the our bond funds, and what I was somehow remembering about a 3-year or 2-year window. And what it is that after 3 years after you open your bond account, if you have funds remaining, there are a couple of new parameters that you have to meet with those funds. One is that you can't invest them in anything that is earning greater interest than what your bond interest was, and that's really not a concern for us. The second one, though, is more complicated. You have to have your funds in a non-federally insured account, which definitely makes me raise my eyebrows. But basically, the advice from the attorney was, it's better if you can spend them within 3 years. If you can't, I can help you. We can talk then. It's kind of what he told us. And so given that, and given the fact that if we wanted to take the option of using this $350,000 this year to just pay down a bill that we get this year on the work that's happening now, we need to transfer those funds into another cost center, because we built them in the budget under debt service because that's where we thought we would need them. But really, we would have to shift them over to the capital improvement cost center. So given that, and kind of my other kind of desire to have those funds sitting for us at the end of the project with the most flexibility in terms of timeline of use and ease of use, I think we've landed on suggesting that we include a warrant article in our budget process to move that $350,000 over into our capital reserve account that already exists. So that will be sitting there waiting on us when we're ready to do self-managed at the end with our project list, or maybe beyond our project list if everything goes well, to use in the future on our building plans, building project renovations. So Brian, does that accurately reflect what you and I talked about? So that's the recommendation we have for you. We don't think that these funds need to be used for the building project. They're part of the 16.845 total that we in the community said, this is what we're asking for us to spend on this. It's just that this ended up being in our budget because of the bond financing and the way it was working. So we think it can, in the end, just be waiting on us when we're ready to use it. So if you agree with that, then we will have our attorney draft up a warrant article that does that, and he makes sure the language is such that it's as easy as possible for us to use that, and it doesn't require us to, have a town meeting or something to use something out of a reserve. Right, Lynn? Isn't that right? Okay. So any feedback or questions about that?
Sounds like a good plan to me.
I agree.
We were already talking today with the construction meetings about how much the cost of materials are up. So all of these self-managed projects that we got bids on a year and a half ago, we knew they were going to have inflation, but right now they have COVID construction costs too. They were saying today, I hadn't heard this, that a 2x4x8 is running at $8, whereas I've got them for under $2 or certainly $2.50 in the past. So anyway, we're going to use every penny of construction money that we have allocated. So this just, like Meredith said, lets us pay down with the current money that we have that's got a 3-year, not expiration, but 3-year more difficult date on it. So spend that up front first and set this particular piece of money aside to sit there for down the road when we get to the self-managed projects, which are, we can spend every penny of that, we know for sure too.
I think the only other thing that we need to continue to keep on our radar is our annual budget meeting and kind of thinking and planning for that. We had talked about trying to do it in the gym and having a secondary location be the band room, the steam room. Someone had also mentioned outdoors. I'm open to either, but I'm preferable to the gym method just because it's a lot easier for, conducting a business meeting, I would say. So just want to take a temperature, see where you are with that. If you're feeling like that's something that we should entertain or should consider differently, because that will have, we need to decide next meeting, right, Len? I think next meeting is our drop dead to decide that.
Brian, would you be willing to look at the ventilation calculations for the gym and make sure it's up to par?
Yeah, I will look at them. The gyms are kind of weird because there's such large volume. They're not so much a short term, right? Bringing everybody in for an hour, as long as we have the ceiling fans going. It's just that we have to clear it out before the kids get in next day. I'll run the calculations again, but the last time I did it for a short term use, it's really no problem.
Any other thoughts, feedback on that?
I definitely, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you're correct, Meredith. We need to have all the details of location, time, all the details to create the warrant articles. So,
I'm certainly supportive of holding it in the gym. And if you prefer the overflow room to outside, it certainly helps protect against weather concerns for sure. So I think that's definitely the route we should pursue.
Yeah, I missed. Are we saying middle school or high school gym?
Middle school.
Okay, it's got easier access, it's a little
Right.
smaller. Yep.
Has anyone talked to Shelley Crosby about this? I assume yes.
We've had some preliminary conversations, but told her we were trying to decide how we were going to do it. So she's waiting to hear more from us. I guess, Lynn, we should circle over to her just to make sure they're comfortable coming and checking people in.
This is the town office remains closed, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I believe it's closed even to appointments right now, or at least it has been quite recently. So I think just checking to make sure that they're up for this option, because if they were to give us a no on that, then that might put a
Right.
wrench in what we're trying to do.
yeah.
So
We
just to
definitely-
remind everyone, the other option is to do what we did last year, which is basically to list every warrant article on the ballot is kind of the other option we have to do if we don't have a town meeting, right? Isn't that what we did last year?
So we
Right.
did.
And this year, they're really pushing for us to do electronic ballot. So we typically just do that sheet of paper with our one question and we fold it and they get that. But this year they're wanting to do electronic ballot just with the counting and all of that and touching the papers and all of that. So the last conversation that I had with Shelley, she knew we were thinking of having the annual meeting. We were just going to get back to her and she didn't seem to have any concerns, but we'll definitely double check.
Lynn, do you know how that electronic would work? Because that's the one vote we can't do by hand, right?
The electronic vote would be at the actual polls. The ones that we do by hand are at the annual meeting. So it would kind of go back to what we did 2 years ago, opposed to what we did last year.
Right, but what I think Jake's asking about is the one vote that we actually usually do at the meeting by paper, right?
Correct, yeah.
If you're meaning that's got to be electronic, then how would we? No, that's not what you mean.
No, the only electronic would be at the actual polls. So that one question of, do you approve on what was approved at the annual meeting?
Okay,
And
so
so just a yes or no question. And that would be on the back of their electronic ballot that they already have that just scans through.
all right, so we would not conduct I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. We wouldn't conduct that one question that we have to do the paper ballot on at the meeting. That would get pushed,
No, that would
No,
be,
that would be at the annual meeting.
and we'll still
that
get,
would be paper.
and we can still do that on paper. Okay.
Yeah.
But it would be 50 people instead of 500.
Yeah.
Right.
And the electronic, we just decided that's gonna have a warrant article question as well. So it might be 2 questions. Is that right?
Nope, the warrant article is at the annual meeting as well.
Okay.
So if we have the annual meeting, all of our business will be conducted at the annual meeting. And the only question is, do you approve what happened at the annual meeting? And we have a sheet that posts all of the details of what was approved at the annual meeting. So
Okay.
it's literally just a yes or no of approving what was approved at the annual meeting.
That sounds like the direction to go for. I mean, the one other question running through my mind is if we have somebody who tries to insist on voting and showing up without a mask, is that something we could ask for police assistance with? I don't think any of us want to be in that position. I'm sure Shelley doesn't, but I also sure don't want to have somebody showing up, you know, the one person who's trying to make a point. They do have a constitutional right to vote, but I don't think it's fair to the 49 other people in the room.
Well, it's probably, how do they handle that at the polls?
It's a good question. I don't
Probably
know.
the same way. We can ask Shelley that question.
Yep.
Okay,
there-
so we will
is
make
there
a
any
final
way-
decision next meeting. Go ahead.
My question was, is there any way we can have an outdoor option for someone who wants to attend and vote but doesn't feel comfortable going inside the gym?
The challenge to that is broadcasting it, and
I think there are also, as I remember when we started looking at this last year before we fell into the full ballot, legal issues about physical presence and how that's defined to be part of a town meeting. I'm not sure the overflow room was really, I seem to remember that last year we determined the overflow room was not really a valid legal participation.
well, they have to be able to see and hear and participate in the meeting wherever they are. So if in your overflow room, you have a live feed that people can be recognized and ask a question or provide input. So that would have to be done if we have an overflow space outside, that criteria would have to be met. So in my opinion, it's better to do it all outside rather than trying to do part of it outside. So.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking it before the executive order came out on remote voting. So
I mean, in theory, we could open the door and have the person just sit in the parking lot outside the door so that we can see them and they can see us, correct?
I think if it was a couple people, that would work fine.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
And they can poke their head in every time there's a hand raised vote.
Yeah, I mean, Richard, your 6-foot measurements in the gym right now for when you have students in there, do you have that on the top of your head as to how many you can have in there? I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm estimating here like 50 on a side, like when I have the curtain, 100 or so in there. But I'd have to measure it out. I don't have X's covering the entire floor. I just have them kind of in various places.
What's the date on that meeting? No, I'm just asking because I believe it's late May, so it wouldn't apply, but there is another occupancy size change coming, and I believe it's late May, which would go to 75% indoors. Although I don't think that if it is late May, which is what I'm remembering, that wouldn't help us out for that meeting.
For some reason, I can't find it on my calendar right now, but I'll keep looking.
Yeah, I have meetings the 18th and the 25th. I think maybe the 18th is the
Yeah,
public
I
meeting.
think it might be the 18th.
I was going to say, I think it was May 18th.
Okay, so if my memory on when the next crowd size increase happens, I think it's May 26th. But I could be wrong on that. So that wouldn't help us.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I mean, we don't normally get more than 50 people. And I can't expect that we're going to get that this year. So, I mean, I think if there's
Yeah.
someone who shows up and doesn't feel safe coming in, and we just want to give them a chair that they sit outside the door, I think that's fine. Unless it's a downpour, then I guess we got a problem.
Right. I mean,
It's May 18th.
yeah, I think that's a good plan to just have a couple metal chairs that can be sat on outside. within hearing. That, I guess that means we need to set up the gym. So whatever set of double doors going outside is most visible can see the moderator and see you, but that should be easy enough to accommodate.
Meredith, would there be a fire code issue if we just set up like a farmer's market tent with no walls up outside the door so that if it was pouring, someone could sit under there? I remember there was an issue with fire code with the parking lot tent.
Yeah, we can only use certain types of tents. I'll have to ask Brent that question if we have one that's of the type we can just set up like that. Most of our tents that are rated for the right fire rating are the more rugged, big, you know, with not the kind you can just pop up like that. So, but we might have one that we can use. So I'll ask about that.
We just need a couple of golf umbrellas on hand.
Right.
Really big golf umbrellas.
Just check the date on that. That's actually next increase is May 24th, so that wouldn't matter to us anyway. And then the other question, if we're going to do this, has anybody reached out to Dave to see if he'd be willing to be moderator? And if not, look for a fallback plan.
I don't think we have. Lynn, can you do that?
Yeah, I was waiting to kind of see what our plan was, if we were definitely going to do the annual meeting or not, but I can definitely reach out to him and come up with another option if not.
Okay, I
So-
think that's all on budget.
Okay, a lot of work on budget. So now we're into action items. We have some co-curricular nominations. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curricular nominations as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
And just read it for people's information. OHS Drama Spring Play, Cami Carter, 70%. OHS Drama Spring Play, Rachel Sear, 30%. OHS Drama Spring Play Tech, John Hawley. Is there any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have a second read of policy EEBA on school-owned vehicles. We had a first read, I think it was about a month ago. In this case, the board was happy with most of the policy, but in particular, wanted us to work on section 1B, which was limits on who could drive. We found out from an insurance point of view that if they're licensed and not suspended, our insurance covers them, but we felt we wanted to put a stronger set of criteria in. So we have put in this language: the district will run a national driving record check. People with past offenses such as vehicular manslaughter, driving to endanger, criminal speeding, operating with a suspended license, an OUI within the last 5 years, or more than one at-fault accident in the last 5 years will not be allowed to drive a school-owned vehicle. And then the coverall other moving violations may prevent driving a school-owned vehicle at the discretion of the superintendent based on recency, frequency, and severity of incidents. So, you know, other circumstances can be covered through that. I think that really the only other changes were we added, changed the word employee to driver, because we made the change in 1A, which is we recognize that our policy IJOC does sometimes have volunteers driving cars. So it's tying to that policy, requiring that they meet all the requirements of that policy and that they have advance permission from the superintendent or designee principal, basically, or SPED director. So that's what we have. So I would make a motion to recognize a second read and adopt policy EEBA. Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion or feedback?
Yeah, I have a question. Like, how long, do we know how long this driving record check takes and how much does it cost? Like, is it really?
I want to say it was $12. It was definitely, it was more than 10 and less than 20. And it's on a computer, it's, you know, some service we sign up for, so it's more or less instantaneous.
The only question I had in 1B, the part about the driver has to have current auto insurance on a vehicle of their own. I understand why you're putting it in there for an excess situation, right? That's your thought on that, I'm guessing.
Well, that and also just it's a screen on people that are insurable. Yep.
Because, I mean, even if they had auto insurance of their own, it's the primary insurance.
No,
is-
it's going to hit us. It's
Right.
it's a largely just as a screen that they're an insurable individual. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. So that's now a policy in place. Subcommittee reports. Policy Subcommittee met, what was it, last Thursday? And finished off this policy. We looked at an inconsistency between our IJOC driver policy and our school volunteer policy. So we'll be bringing forward small changes in language to make that consistent. We went through the good way through the E policies, and I think the only one that really had significant changes was the chemical safety policy, which was really nothing substantive, just updating language. And we ended up changing 2 small thresholds in DJ. In particular, I think the awarding of a subcontract without 3 competitive bids to a family member of a staff member went from 500 to 2,000. All of this will be coming forward to the board at the next meeting. None of them are here, but just letting you know. And there was one other small threshold kind of, it was whether the business manager could sign a contract for less than a year or up to and including 1 year. So a couple of small tweaks on the thresholds. And so that's the output from the last policy subcommittee. It'll all come at the next board meeting. It wasn't done in time to put on the agenda for this board meeting, and all small revisions. And we'll continue through the E's and into the F policies. So we're going to slow down when we get to the I's and J's. Those are thick, but we might actually get through the policy review this year, which would be nice. Next up is UTC. Aaron.
We have not met since our last meeting, and wellness either.
Okay, and Spruce.
Either have we, and there's no future meeting date set.
Okay, and curriculum.
Meeting this coming Thursday. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I got the agenda sitting on my desk.
Facilities and Building Committee. The Building Committee is meeting tomorrow evening, and we'll get an update. Other than that, we've been having the regular meetings with the architects and with the construction crew. Kristen gave you a bit of an update. ACE in particular is really starting to look like there's going to be a space there.
I was just going to say we got an updated schedule today. It's been a while since they've updated the schedule. And the ASA admin building and classroom addition is due to be finished on June 4th. The ASA kitchen and cafeteria is due to be done on July 30th. The ASA interior SREF projects around the bathrooms, and I think that's what this one is about, is due to be done August 10th. The OHS kitchen cafeteria is due to be done August 10th. The high school auditorium, or the auditorium and band choir rooms, are due to be done January 25th of 2022. And the high school in-cap classroom edition due to be done November 26th of next fall. So that one moved up quite a bit, actually. So that was in the field project, and track is due to be done on August 2nd.
On that last one, what does that say to us about the possibility of use next fall? Is that still going to be an option for us?
Yep, that's what they've told us, that they're completing it and will be, I can't remember if we have to wait a little bit after the second, or if the second is it's ready for use. I think the second is when it's ready for use.
That's
Like
my
with the
memory.
grass.
Okay, good.
They're going to use sod to speed up the transition, and I think there's a 2-week sod settling period that will make it ready for use.
So everything is right now showing either on time or ahead of schedule, which is great.
And I think all the exterior colors are picked at this point. That's been a big process of,
Just the high school end cap is the last one. They're going to bring us some samples.
Right.
We've given our preference, but they're going to give us some samples to make sure.
and I did hear they're going to be deconstructing the breezeway sooner rather than not immediately, but they're starting to talk about that, which for me is kind of coming full circle. That's for me, at least that's when we started on the construction project, is we knew that was such an eyesore, and Reg did a lot of good diligence and came back with a plan that said, well, we can set that right for $50,000. And then I started thinking, well, that's real money. We actually need a plan before we start spending 50,000 here and 50,000 there. And 3-4 years later, we're here where we are, where we went out and got the plan, and that certainly needed to go, but there were a lot of other things that we got all tied together. So
We won't need a waiver for being out of code for fire anymore, which would be nice.
Yep.
Did anyone have the opportunity to ask Robin or anyone else for some ideas regarding that transformer?
Yes, we've been talking with them about that, and they do have some information they can share with us. I think the short answer is that you do have to provide access, but you can also probably have something there that can just be taken down, like if it's a landscaping feature on all sides, or on that, just you're going to give up these trees if they have to access it. They indicated that there are some setbacks to how close you should locate whatever you're doing to camouflage the area. But that there are landscape options. There are some other options that can go with landscaping, like some different types of fencing, or even I think Aaron had the idea of kind of this giant, what was it, rock, like fake rock kind of thing that can be placed over it. And those are some possibilities that we can look at, but it's really probably after they get done with the work that we will be taking that up with the architect giving us some advice and us figuring out what option makes the best sense.
We'll talk about that again tomorrow night too.
Great, thank you.
Can we ask the students what they want? I mean, like a graffiti mural board that anyone can paint on as long as it's in good taste, that constantly gets updated. Anything, I mean, it's the students who have to take pride in the area, and I'd love to hear their feedback.
Yeah, they should. They're welcome to offer suggestions too. I think that, yeah, it would be good to solicit their ideas. Anything else on construction?
Other than to say we're going to have a really busy summer with our own projects, because we're also doing our part of SREF this summer. So we gave some of the SREF projects to Bowman to do in that contract, and we kept some that we could do more economically ourselves. And so Brent will have all that on his plate. Plus, we're looking at doing the OHS office light touch renovation, because one of the SREF projects is to add a transaction window in the office in the vestibule, so that visitors don't have to come into school to have an exchange with the office. So we're going to try to go ahead and do the whole office light touch reno and renovation this summer as well. It's going to be tight on time. CHA is trying to help us get to a point where we can get that out to bid. So that's going to be a big project this summer as well.
And if you see Brent this summer, buy him a cup of coffee. He's going to be really busy. All right. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? We're into our second public comment. Is there any public comment? We're down to just a few diehards, so may not be. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Our next meeting is Tuesday, April 27th at 6 p.m. In the library and on Zoom. Is there any request for information or follow-up? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to executive session. I will just say for the audience that there will be no votes taken after we come out of executive session except adjournment. So not a lot to hang on for. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056D, labor negotiations. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. We'll go into executive session and we don't need any administrators for this, right? Yeah, everybody's free to go except for the board. Thank you, everybody.